Hi, this is Lorraine, and I've been guided to create another video. If you'll give me a minute to clear center and balance my energy, we'll get started. Again, there's going to be several areas that I will be discussing in this video, so I would recommend using the timestamps to navigate it as you wish. The most important information that comes in related to 3i Atlas is that this lull of information that's coming into us, humanity, opens the door to allow first contact to take a life of its own. I think I'm going to leave it there. I don't want to elaborate too much on that. I would like you to think about that and consider what that means for you, because this experience is unique for all of us. The next thing is, it was suggested in the comments that I encourage people to ask questions, so I thought that was good advice. So I would encourage you to ask questions in the comments. I'm happy to respond to them as best I can from my perspective and see if I can't elaborate or expand our perspective. I think that conversation and engaging one another is the best way for us to help each other, learn from each other, and expand. So I am all for that. So please feel free to ask questions. The next thing is the only piece of information that's come in related to first contact is specifically about that Spacegate or Stargate, however you want to look at it. Right after I finished the video, it was described to me as a transdimensional gateway or portal. And it requires the participant to shift perspective and consciousness to displace themselves from their current reality. And I wanted to read that specifically from my notes because I didn't think I could wing it and explain it much better. There are no controls or levers or anything to assist an individual from moving through that gateway. It's a product solely of consciousness. It's all about shifting consciousness, and that's where this idea of keys and codes come in, because to bring our consciousness to a place where we're able to shift it, to literally displace our physical self and move it from one place to another, is a profound skill. It implies profound work. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's accessible information. And again, I would like to encourage anybody and everybody to ask questions, because I know this information might be your first exposure or might seem a little extraneous or out there on the outer edges of reality. But the experiences I've had do not afford me the ability or to deny this truth, to block it in any way. And I'll elaborate more about that at the end of the video, but I'll just leave that right there. The next thing is telepathic communication. So I had a conversation with someone this week about language, which led me to want to discuss telepathic communication. We will all at some point be engaging one another telepathically. That is the most effective and accurate form of communication. If you notice in my videos, I have a lot of issues using language. Not because I don't have language, not because I'm not an articulate person. It's just that language is very restricting. And so when I am discussing the AI technology that's connected to those particles of energy or particles that are being dropped or projected or ejected onto Earth through the sun, it was, someone had asked me, are those nanites? They could be seen as nanites, but we all have an idea of what nanites are, right? We have this whole paradigm around science and technology and what defines a nanite. And if I use that language, then I'm pigeonholing that technology, that AI technology, which is being brought here to this Earth, to this planet, to help us. And again, the information that comes in is this technology is so far beyond what we can conceive, and that I feel it does it in injustice to refer to that technology as nanites, right? I don't even really care much for the term particles of energy. I think that's a misnomer, but that's the best way to describe it. So I have this personally, this inner conflict with language, because it's not going to clearly define or explain what this experience is that we're going through. And again, at the end of the video, I'm going to explain that a little bit more, why I believe that to be true, or how that manifested in my life. But this process of transcendence, expansion, and growth is an experience in and of itself that is pulling us out of the current paradigms, belief systems, dogma, and archetypes of this world. We all have a path and purpose. We all have something we are here to do on this world in this lifetime. And we are drawn to that thing innately. We are drawn to that thing in our mind, body, and spirit. We are pulled towards it. And at this phase of an expansion, all the blocks that have been put in place are falling away. And so we'll find ourselves even drawn more so inexplicably to certain things. These things that we're drawn to are embedded in our DNA, and they're embedded in our consciousness. And they are meant to guide us to our path and purpose. And so all of us have something that we're drawn to that has meaning deep within our soul, deep within our consciousness, that we're meant to carry, expand upon, and share with each other. I feel that so deeply. Transcending humanity has a deep, innate calling to gather, hold, and share information with one another, to create the foundation that we will build from in our next level of expanded consciousness. Same thing with the people who will be repeating this cycle. They will, at this point, they are doing things. Right now, they are creating, they are having experiences that will create the reality that will build the foundation of the world they will be living on. All of us are doing that with our words, with our actions, with our thoughts and our intentions. All of us. One way or another. We are creating our foundation to build from. And again, it's very difficult for me to use terms like 3D and 5D because that doesn't even begin to touch upon this idea of expanded consciousness and where we're going and what we'll be doing. I'm gonna go back a little bit because there's something very important that I didn't say that I feel is very important to say. When I was talking about the transdimensional gateway portal space, when I was talking about that, what came in very strong was that what people have used in the past, if you submit to this secret space program and the fact that humanity has been in space for a while, or parts of humanity have been in space for a while, if you submit to that, they were using a gateway very similar to what they would use in the movie Stargate, where you would have to align symbols and to create a portal that would take you from point A to point B accurately. And when they would do that, they would travel from one 3D world to another 3D world. That's very important. Everybody thinks the beings, if you're like, again, if you submit to this idea that there have been beings from other worlds here, which I believe is true, those beings may seem like they're above us because they appear to have abilities that we don't, but we have been artificially restrained. We have been artificially restrained. We are so far beyond, we should be so far beyond where we are right now, but we have literally been artificially restrained. So those beings, although they appear to be at a higher level of awareness or ability than us, they're not. And as we go through this process, and as those chains or the binding that's been placed upon us is removed, we will expand at a very fast pace. That being said, when we go through this transdimensional space or gateway that only requires the participant to shift their perspective and their consciousness in order to displace themselves, when we do that, we have the capacity to move from this 3D space, this perceived 3D space, to higher levels of consciousness. So when I move through that space gateway, I'm going from the 3D to the 5D. I'm going through what we perceive as the 3D to the 5D for these meetings with these beings from different worlds. So again, moving through these transdimensional gateways allows you to move to higher, we'll say higher levels of consciousness, although that's not really true. This is a much expanded level of consciousness, which allows us greater access to the divine consciousness. And then through that, expanded or greater abilities. So I feel like that was a very important discernment to make. Additionally, I said I'm moving from a perceived 3D level of consciousness to the 5D level of consciousness because right now humans, transcending humanity, is living in two worlds. We are literally living in two worlds. And I did a video about this in the past. I think I only discussed it once briefly. But I had a very strong vision of me standing next to a bunch of different people. I'll try to find the diagram that I drew. And there were like little triangles, like separating us. And they were invisible barriers. And we couldn't see it. So I was existing at a 5D, even though the person next to me was still existing at a 3D level of consciousness, right? And we all look like we're on the same plane of existence, but we're really not. Those barriers are invisible, but they exist. And the very strong message that came in, I think I'm going to try to read that. Transcending humanity is no longer subject to 3D laws, rules, belief systems, but we still need to navigate through that reality. So even though we are not subject to the belief systems and the paradigms that have been created at this 3D level of conscious awareness, we still navigate this world. For example, I still need to have a job to make money, right? To feed my kids, to feed myself, to have a place to live. So there's certain things I still need to do, but I'm not subject to the flow of energy at the 3D level of consciousness. And again, I hesitate and I have a hard time using these terms 3D and 5D, but there are circumstances where it is best to use those terms to try to explain what I'm saying. The final thing I wanted to discuss was I saw a post or something on social media where they were talking about where did things start going wrong, right, here in the United States. And they were talking about how they used to read the Bible in the 1950s and how they took the Bible out of schools, and that's when everything started falling apart. Or that was one trigger for us to start losing our moral code or moral balance. And I thought, wow, that's very interesting. But the strong message that came in is there's no going back. We can't go back. We can't all of a sudden bring the Bible into schools now. It's not appropriate for where we're at. And there may be people that would disagree with that because they want to bring the old ways back, but there's no going back. We're moving forward. We have a whole society that's transcending. We have another part of society that will be repeating the cycle, and we're at a very profound place of divergence. So again, when I was talking about that social media post, it was very, very clear to me that we cannot go back. And in the past videos, I've talked about how I've been through, all the stuff I've been through have brought me to this place. And I haven't really discussed it in a really long time, but I was very strongly guided all day today to talk about this. And it's not something I care to talk about, and I probably won't talk about it again. But I was very strongly guided to talk about it today. So there is no going back. We are moving to an expanded level of awareness. When I talk about all the things I've been through, when I was 21, I had a very difficult time. I had repressed memories that came back to me. I remembered being molested as a very small child. I remembered, always remembered the abuse I suffered physically and emotionally from my oldest brother. I've had people attempt to rape me. I have been, when I turned 21, as I was having those repressed memories come back to me, I literally, within 3 months, had people try to get me into, men try to get me into stripping, prostitution, pornography, trying to make me feel like I would be so successful, trying to manipulate me, completely trying to objectify me. And if it wasn't for my father, who taught me that I had value by showing me that I had value by the way he treated me, by showing me that I had value by the way he treated my mother, I don't know what could have happened to me. But every time somebody tried to convince me that they were trying to help me and do me a favor, I knew that they weren't, because they were nothing like my father. That being said, the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life, having so much trauma, having so much fear, anxiety, low self-esteem at that young age of 21 because of a lot of the abuse I suffered. I made a very poor decision, and I had an abortion. And it's the worst decision I've ever made in my life. And it's taken me, I'll be 59 in April, it's taken me many years to come to terms with that. And I'm telling you that not for sympathy or for any type of political gain, or I'm not taking sides on any political topics. I'm telling it to you because one of the hardest things I ever had to do was let go of religious dogma. So one of my brothers is gay. I have 3 brothers. And again, I was a very devout Catholic. All the way through college, I went to church on Sundays. I did Ash Wednesday, Palm Sunday. I did all the things I was supposed to do, confession. And my brother came to visit me when I was in college, and I'm like, let's go to church together on Sunday. My gay brother, my brother that's gay, and he said to me, I can't go to church. The Catholic Church kicked out the gays. So this would have been around 1988, 1989, somewhere around there. And I was like, what? I didn't understand. I was like, well, just come with me anyway. He's like, no. They said no gays in the church. I went home and I was visiting my parents, and I went to my grandmother's church because it made me feel connected to her. And I went to confession, and at the end of my confession, I told the priest I didn't understand why my brother couldn't go to church with me because he was gay. I didn't understand why the church wouldn't allow gays to go to Mass. And he said, he was very firm with me. He scolded me. He said I had no place in questioning the church, and was very upset with me. And he gave me like 3 Our Fathers and 7 Hail Marys, which was like catastrophic. That's like, you are a very bad girl. Like, that's huge. In my whole entire life, I started going to confession when I was like 6 years old, at catechism. But it was harsh. And so I went up to the front of the church, kneeled in the pews, and said my prayers. On another visit to my parents, I went to the same church where my grandma went. Again, I felt, always made me feel close to her because she passed away when I was 17. And I went to confession and confessed that I had had an abortion. And the priest forgave me and did the sign of the cross and so on and so forth. And I said to him, I said, but I still feel guilty. I still feel sad. I still feel remorse. It pains me to this day to even think about. And he scolded me. He scolded me. He told me I've been forgiven for my sins. It's not my place to question the church. And that I was just to accept his forgiveness. And he gave me 1 Our Father and 3 Hail Marys. And I was very confused. I walked out and I went up to the front of the church and I said my prayers, and then I left. And I had to think about this long and hard for a long time. I was so confused. I'm like, I took a life and I got 1 Our Father and 3 Hail Marys. That was my penance. When I questioned the church, about my brother's sexuality and why he wasn't allowed to be in the church or go to the church. My brother, who I'd been going to church with since I was a toddler, when I was climbing under the pews, he'd be sitting under there with me, right? The same person had been going to church all with me, good Catholic, but he couldn't go to church anymore. And just my questioning the church, questioning that decision, I was giving what I know, and maybe you can't relate to this if you're not Catholic, was a catastrophic sentence of 3 Our Fathers and 7 Hail Marys. That's never been done before. It's 1 Our Father, 3 Hail Marys. That's my experience, no matter what. And the hypocrisy, the contradiction made no sense to me. And the bottom line was, if you don't accept my brother, then you don't accept me. So I left. I couldn't reconcile that. I couldn't reconcile ostracism. I couldn't reconcile the hypocrisy of the punishment, I considered it punishment at that time, of questioning the church versus the punishment of taking a life. Like, I couldn't reconcile this. It made no sense to me. And I couldn't do it anymore. And that was when I made the choice. I cannot practice this religion. And I went from 24 to 24, what year was it? It was 1991 when I had that epiphany and made that decision that I could no longer live within the confines of dogma and religion. And it wasn't until 2016 that I had that massive spiritual awakening. And through that time, I had to find some way to reconcile that I was no longer practicing Catholicism. My dad and my grandmother were profoundly affected my life. They were profound role models. I worshiped who they were. I wanted to be like them, and they were devout Catholics. And I was walking away from that. It was very difficult, but it was something that I needed to do, and I needed to do it to open myself up at that place in 2016. I had to do it to come to that place where I was open to this change. It was necessary. And the second I walked out in 1991, there was no going back. I knew it. There was no going back. There's only going forward. And I have dealt with so much stuff in my life between then and now to release so much energy, to release so many layers of trauma and pain and sadness and betrayal. I've had to go through so much, and the greatest lesson I've learned through that process is that I didn't need that priest to forgive me. I didn't need God to forgive me. I didn't need my grandmother, my father, or anybody else to forgive me. I needed to forgive me. I needed to forgive myself and find a way to love myself through all my trauma, through all my pain, through all my mistakes, through everything. And I've said this in many videos, I am not perfect, but I've had to work through that and find a way to where I am now. And again, I'm still not perfect, but I am much better today than I was yesterday or in 1991. It's an arduous journey. And what I've learned is there is no going back. There's only going forward. And whatever comes before me, I'm ready for, and I'm willing to go through it. Because I know who I am. And I love myself unconditionally. And I know I have no place in judging others. And I'm okay if other people judge me. Because again, I know who I am. I know where I've been. I know where I am. And I know where I'm going. Thank you so much if you're here still listening to this. But this is my most profound experience and my most profound lesson were those two confession experiences. They absolutely changed my life. And they absolutely were stepping stones for me becoming who I am today. If you give me a minute, let me see if anything else comes in. Okay, so nothing else has come in, but I will encourage you once again to ask questions. You can ask me questions about anything I've said in this video, or anything I've said in any of my other videos, or anything that's not even related to this video or any of my videos. I'm happy to answer those questions as best I can from my perspective. Thank you so much for being here.